Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. So in today's video, we're going to be talking about how to practice arpeggios. Now, I was recently watching a bunch of different videos on YouTube about how to practice arpeggios, and most of them involved methods of practicing in rhythms specifically. And the other videos that I found talked about pulling the thumb under the hand as a way to fix the technical problems when it comes to playing arpeggios. Now, in my opinion, with my technical background, these methods of practicing are not very effective. Practicing in rhythms can be effective, but only if you have solved the technical problem or the issue that's causing you to not be able to play fluent and smooth arpeggios. And in fact, sometimes these practice techniques can actually cause more problems, which we'll also talk about. So in this video, I'm going to show you a better way to practice arpeggios so that we can really fix the technical problems that are causing issues with our arpeggios and have smoother, better arpeggios. Now, a really quick note on this topic. This video comes as a viewer request, so if you have any thoughts or ideas for future videos, don't forget to leave those in the comments down below. Now, the first thing we want to discuss is the problems that come up when we play arpeggios. And so, like I mentioned before, we want to solve the technical problems, whatever the technical issue that's keeping us from playing arpeggios that are really smooth and fluent. We don't just simply want to practice Band-Aid practice techniques that may help to a degree, but they won't really solve the technical problem or the issue. Now, there are two specific issues. The first one is the thumb, how we use the thumb when we play arpeggios. And the second one is how we use our arms and our wrists when we play arpeggios. And we're going to talk about both of these. All right, so first let's go ahead and talk about the thumb. Now, in some other videos, I've talked a little bit about the thumb and how it has to be used differently than the fingers, which is kind of obvious. But let's talk about some specifics that can help us understand the ways that are effective when using the thumb, when playing arpeggios, and also the ways that are not as effective. So go ahead and do an experiment with me. I want you to just take your hand, it can be right or left, and I want you to pull your thumb in and touch your thumb to your fifth finger. Now, depending on how in tune you are with your muscles in your hand and how they feel, you might notice that this muscle right here, this thumb muscle, is incredibly tight and tense. And if you go ahead and feel it with your other hand, you'll notice that it's really, really hard, very stiff. And that's what happens when we play arpeggios oftentimes, because we're usually told, okay, I'm just going to take a C major arpeggio just for the sake of demonstrating because it's really easy to see on the overhead cam. But when we play arpeggios, okay, now I've played the fifth, and now I have to reach the thumb under as far as I can, and see what has to happen is it has to come about to the fifth finger. And so the ensuing result is we have an incredible amount of tension. And notice how these other fingers want to just shoot out like this because there's so much tension in the hand. And again, I invite you to experiment on your own and just try this and see how this feels. Now, like I've talked about in other videos, if you have an incredible amount of tension in this thumb muscle, which translates to other muscles throughout the hand, it's very difficult to play fluently and smoothly, okay? And quick note on this, when we talk about playing arpeggios, we're not talking about playing really slow arpeggios where I can have all of these excess movements. And if I do have a little bit of tension, it's not really a big deal because I'm playing so smoothly, or slowly rather. What we're talking about is we're talking about really fast arpeggios, and that wasn't even that fast, but we're talking about really, really fast arpeggios, 144 to the quarter note, right, playing 16th notes. We're talking about really fast arpeggios or even faster, okay? So when we do that with our thumb, it creates an incredible amount of tension in the hand. This makes it very difficult to move, okay? Now, this is very common advice that teachers give, okay? And it causes a lot of problems. And let's go ahead and look at the other issues before we look at the solution. So the other issues that And I've been taught this in the past, and so I'm very familiar with this, is that oftentimes there's two other solutions or ways of practicing that people have their students do oftentimes. And the one way is, okay, so when I play an arpeggio here, even if I pull my thumb all the way over here, right, notice that it's still not, it's not going to be to this note. It's not going to be to our octave note, our destination note here. And so there's two solutions. The first solution is we want to twist the wrist like so. So we want to pivot the wrist here, and there we go. We're right there. Now the issue with this is that anytime we move the wrist to an extreme range of motion like this or like this, it creates an incredible amount of tension in the wrist. And again, it can cause a lot of fatigue, and it actually can cause the tendons that go through the wrist, through the carpal tunnel. It can cause them to get very irritated, and it's just really hard on the wrist. And the other thing is that, again, we're talking about playing at speed. You see all those extra movements, and notice how those notes don't sound smooth at all, okay? So that kind of this movement all the way up the keyboard, it just doesn't really work. It's not fluent. It causes, again, tension. So the other way of practicing that solves this problem, because again, the thumb can't quite get there, is to lead with the elbow. So we kind of play up the keyboard like this, okay? So notice that if I play here and I bring my hand over here, see how much closer my thumb is? It's basically right there. And so we can even make a slight adjustment in the wrist, and it's there. So it's mainly the leading with the elbow. And you'll notice there is this movement in my wrist, but it's not this extreme movement, right? It's very slight. And this is a much better solution, but again, it has problems. The first problem is that because the elbow is being lifted out away from the body so much, it creates an incredible amount of tension in the elbow. And also the upper arm and the shoulder, which is kind of holding that out. Okay, and the general rule of thumb is that the shoulder and the upper arm muscles, they're very large muscles. They don't move typically very fast. It's not like our forearm muscles that are really, really fast moving. They're large, slow-moving muscles, and they get fatigued very easily. So anytime you're playing like this, oftentimes people call it like flying elbows, it just creates a lot of tension in the elbow. And so it's a better solution, but it's not quite as good as it can be. Again, if we look at that on the way down, notice that I'm closer, my third finger is closer to the fifth, but it's still not quite there. Right? And so it kind of creates this kind of, we still have to have a lot of those movements in the wrist. And so with this flying elbow plus all these movements in the wrist, it makes it very, very difficult to have really smooth arpeggios, okay? So another just quick little note on that is it kind of puts the arm out of alignment with the fingers. Okay, so it's very important for the arm to always to be in alignment with the fingers as they're playing, as this gives them power and strength. It sort of channels the power of the arm into the fingers. Okay, so now let's look at the solutions. Then there's two specific solutions. The first one is with the thumb. So the thumb can come under the hand about to the third finger without this muscle and the rest of the hand muscles becoming tense and tight. But it can't come much farther than that, otherwise it starts getting tense. So if we look at, let's say the left hand, as I'm gonna come here, if my thumb is behind my third finger, my hand's not tight, it's not tense, but it's close, it's much closer than if it was here, right? So there, that can help us. But again, now we have to have some other method of practicing to get us there. And that is where forearm rotation comes in. Now, I've talked about forearm rotation a lot, and I remember when I first learned about it and my teacher started helping me apply it to my playing, I thought it was like the holy grail. It was like, oh my gosh, so many things just feel so much better. So I'm kind of obsessed with it in a way, but let me show you how it can really make these arpeggios so much more fluent and smooth, okay? So the basic movement is this. If I play an arpeggio, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually rotate my arm this way. So each note that I play has a rotational movement either to the right or to the left. So my thumb is going to be left, right, and then right more. And just if you rotate continual, or you continue to rotate towards the left, then your thumb goes back to C. So it's sort of this left, right, left. Now, forgetting about the thumb coming under a little bit so we can have a little smoother or a more smooth connection. Forget about that for a second. Just try this at home. Just pause the video and try this. And I want you to notice how easy that is and how smooth it is and how natural it feels. There is a slight horizontal movement in the arm, which is very simple and easy. The arm is aligned behind each finger that's playing. Hey guys, so this video ended up being super long. It was almost 20 minutes, so I decided to break it into 2 different parts. So in part 2, I'm going to show you how using the thumb in this way to avoid tension and using rotation and avoiding some of those weird motions in the wrist all comes together in arpeggio practice. So look out for that later this week. Thank you so much for watching. If you haven't done so, make sure and subscribe so you don't miss any future videos, and I'll see you guys next time.
Ich grolle nicht, und wenn das